feeling quite brave, so I'm willing to put one of my closely held, fairly recent woo-woo beliefs on the line.
Okay. Well, you're very brave, and we can go at whatever speed you're comfortable with here.
Sure.
I can even sort of explain why I'm asking you the questions
Yes,
before I ask them or something along those
let's
lines.
do
Would that
that.
be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can
Okay.
kind of talk about the questions themselves.
Yeah, because I think it's helpful for the people who are listening to understand why I'm even asking you these questions.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
All
So
right. Well, what's your claim?
I believe in astrology.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, the skeptic half of the Seeker and the Skeptic podcast. I'm really excited to share this conversation between my co-host Kat and my friend Anthony Magnabosco with you. Me and Anthony have had fun working on a couple of projects together, so I knew him and Kat would get on well too. Anthony's a practitioner of street epistemology and the founder of Street Epistemology International. Street epistemology is a conversational technique based on the Socratic method, but they'll get into all of that in the interview. For our next interview, Kat will matchmake me with one of her fellow seekers. I just hope she's found someone as friendly as Anthony. In our regular The Seeker and the Skeptic podcast, Kat and I explore all sorts of fringe topics from angels to ayahuasca. You can find those shows in your podcast app, on YouTube, or on our website, seekerandskeptic.com. We're on social media too, of course. Look for @SeekerSkeptic on Twitter and Instagram. We hope this conversation will inspire you to talk to someone on the other side of the seeker-skeptic divide. Enjoy!
Okay, so I'm just going to dive in.
Let's do it.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you so much for being the first guest on the Seeker and the Skeptic.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm your first guest.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Yeah, and I just want to compliment you on your surname. It's one of the best last names that I've heard. Magnabosco, is that right?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a friend whose last name is Nice Wonder, and he also
Oh,
does
wow.
street epistemology. And I just thought that's a perfect name for somebody who's interested in having cordial conversations with people.
Especially
But I
about
appreciate that. Thank you.
all right, especially about these topics. So I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
what is street epistemology?
Well, it's a way of engaging with somebody where you're being respectful and asking questions about how they arrived at their position, as opposed to telling somebody that they're wrong or linking them to an article that shows that everything that they thought was true for the longest time isn't. So it's where you actually listen to a person and try to figure out what their best reason is for thinking something is true, and then explore with them how they adequately validated the reason that they're building all these beliefs on. And it seems like it's a pretty effective and fun approach. And it seems to be changing discourse for the better, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like it's discourse based on empathy, and people seem to be waking up to this now. Like I've had a lifetime of having heated debates in my own family, which never really get anywhere. And it kind of taught me that having a discussion where your beliefs are differing means an argument, means like storming out of the room, slamming the door. But when my counterpart on this podcast, Rebecca the Skeptic, told me about this way of reasoning with each other and just having these open conversations, I was instantly intrigued. So how did you get into street epistemology?
It started when I read a book that was explaining how to do it, and I was skeptical. So I went out with my camera and tried to record conversations of me attempting to use the approach and not getting very far, but running into people who were giving me feedback, suggestions on how to improve and get better at it. So slowly over the years, I fell in love with the approach and the response that I would get from the people that I would use it with. And then the response of the people who were watching the videos that I uploaded to my YouTube channel. That was even encouraging because people were watching exchanges and re-examining their own positions on those same claims, even though they weren't the ones that I was interviewing. So it's really kind of blossomed from there. We've been doing this for 7 years or so since the book came out. And I like to think that we've even taken the approach far beyond the original scope of the book that introduced it to everybody. But it's been blowing up and becoming a valuable tool for people regardless of where they stand on any claim. It doesn't even matter if you're a spiritual person, or you think that there's a supernatural realm, or you're just like the diehard skeptic who just questions everything. And this tool can be used for anybody, and that's what I find so compelling about it.
Yeah, geez, at this time in history, and obviously you could maybe apply this to multiple times in history, but it just feels very relevant right now when beliefs about all sorts of things are becoming so polarized. And it's nice to think that we actually do have this tool. Should we pick it
Yeah,
up?
I'm optimistic about it. However, there may be some people who don't even want to engage with you on a subject. And if that's the case, then you really can't use the tool. But
Mm.
if you have at least two willing parties who want to explore a claim and they want to believe true things, if you have that, then that's a really good start for exploring the foundation that these views are based on.
Yeah, so that's the prerequisite. You can't just go and street epistemologize anyone. You have to like have a mutual agreement that two people are willing to have a conversation like this to begin with.
That's right. That's right. If somebody shuts me down or calls the police on me because they don't like the questions that I'm asking, well, that's going to be problematic for showing examples of how to do this and then challenging people's views. But once people, I think, understand what street epistemology really is, that it's a tool that you can use to gain clarity on the confidence that you have in a particular claim. Now, that could be threatening to a lot of people, especially beliefs that are foundational to who they are and everything. But I think once people understand that this is a tool that anybody can use, and it's a useful tool that humans should probably be familiar with, then I think the criticisms fall away. Then I think the tendency to actually want to probe your own views increases.
Yeah, so from what you're saying, it sounds like this isn't just something you do with other people. You could kind of apply these questions just to yourself, like in a journal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally use SE on my own views all the time. Sometimes even before I open my mouth or start to post something on social media, I might start running through a series of questions.
Right.
How do I actually know that that's true? What would change my mind? Can I really be so sure that that's the case? So it tends to make you a little bit more humble about what it is you think you yourself know.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like we could
Hmm.
all use some of that. So, when you are doing, you've got a YouTube channel. What's some of the first things that you say to somebody when you like approach them and you want to get into this conversation?
Hmm. Yeah, I should point out, I do a street version of street epistemology where I initiate talks with strangers and ask them if they want to come and talk with me. Most people who use this approach would never think of doing that. That's just an unusual thing to do. And there may even be some cultural differences. Like I actually have more of a hard time doing this in England as
Yeah.
opposed to
Oh my God,
somewhere
yeah.
in Texas or something in
I
the United
actually
States.
I have a story about that just recently. I was just walking down our local high street and I saw somebody maybe 20 feet away who looked like they might want to talk to me about something. And I took another route home. I just went down a side street. Right.
Wow. Well, maybe this is a hurdle that we'll have to overcome in various cultures and geographic regions, I suppose. It's still even a little odd in my area, or even the university that I go to, where I've been doing it for months or years even.
Mm.
I still get a little pushback, or people walk up to me to ask me what I'm doing, or sometimes security, investigates a little bit. But to answer your question, I generally ask people if they have 5 minutes to talk about a deeply held belief that they think is true, and
Okay.
allow me to ask respectful yet challenging questions to see how they arrive there. So I try to lay everything out on the table. I even sometimes these days offer to share my position on their claim, because that's been a common criticism, is that you're not showing all your cards on the table. They don't know where you stand on this thing. So I've even been going so far as to tell them, or at least encourage them to ask me if they want to know where I stand on the issue. But once we get consent and a basic understanding of what it is I'm trying to do, then I ask them to surface a claim that they think is true. And I start asking questions. What are your reasons for thinking that? Is that really the reason why? If that you decided that that wasn't a good reason, would it affect your confidence in the claim? And then usually the talks are fairly brief, 5 to 10 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes if they really get engaged, with which most people do. And I try to end it on a note where it's friendly and they've been given something to think about later.
Mm.
If I can reach that point, then I try to end it so that they can think about it on their own.
Well, see, that's what I think is so useful. Even if you're somebody who's like, maybe quite protective of your beliefs, and I think we all are to an extent, um, having something to chew on, which could either maybe even strengthen them ultimately, but at least clarify them in your own head, that's just helpful. Like I'm just thinking for myself with some of my beliefs, I would like to investigate them further, not necessarily with the hope to get rid of them,
Hmm.
but just because it seems like the smart thing to do.
Yes, like there's value in exploring our beliefs. I literally had a conversation with two LDS Mormon missionaries, and I just uploaded the video yesterday. And at the start, one of them seemed a little hesitant to do it. There were two guys, and we talked about exactly this. He said, "Well, I'm a little worried that I might not be able to adequately explain why I think that this is true, or maybe I'd think that I didn't do a good job of it." So we talked about the benefit of surfacing reasons for our beliefs, even though later we may reflect and think that wasn't a really good reason, or I could have done a better job of explaining it. There's still value in doing that because you could be more prepared for next time, or maybe find better reasons for the belief, or discover that you don't have good reasons for the belief and back off on your confidence in the truth of the proposition.
Right. I'm curious to know, has anyone convinced you about something? Like, have you adopted a new belief based on any of the people you've spoken to?
I used to be pretty against open carry guns in Texas. I had, and maybe even perhaps to this day, still have somewhat of a visceral reaction to it when I see. I literally went to my kid's middle school. This was a few years ago, standing in line for a school thing, and the woman standing directly in front of me had a pistol on her hip, and this was at a middle school. So, however, to answer your question, I have engaged with people about open carry, and in the act of challenging their various positions, whether they were for or against, it's helped me take another look at the issue myself.
Mm.
And I think I'm more open to the idea of people walking around with guns than I was when I saw that woman in the school. So, for example,
Right. Yeah,
that's just one of many.
yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think is happening with the seeker and the skeptic. I think both of us, when we're looking at things that even me as a seeker might have dismissed beforehand, we're at least starting to understand why somebody might choose to believe something. And I say the word choice. Maybe that's like a whole other thing
Yeah.
altogether. But it's that idea of being more open when you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes,
Hmm.
which is helpful.
I think you had also mentioned something about empathy,
Mm,
and I'm so glad I remember this because I think that's a big part of this approach too. That it's not helpful really to anybody unless you get enjoyment or entertainment from it. But approaching these conversations from the perspective of I'm going to destroy their
mm,
worldview and tear them down and make them realize how stupid they are. You got to set that aside.
yeah.
You really need to be emotionally mature about this and try to approach it from a place of empathy of well, if they're mistaken, would I want to help them? Or perhaps I'm mistaken on a position and I would certainly want to help. I would like somebody to help me figure that out if that was the case.
Mm,
So I think taking another look at the motivations that are behind why somebody would even want to debate with somebody
mm.
is an important discussion, let alone deciding to use this particular tool of street epistemology.
Right. It is. It does sound like it's a tool that could be used for evil. This is something that me and Rebecca have spoken about, but one of my arguments I often use is, why would you want to take this? Let's say it's a comfort blanket that somebody has, like my
Mm-hmm,
mum has about heaven. That's a
mm-hmm,
comfort blanket for
mm-hmm,
her. Why would
mm-hmm.
you want to destroy that? And it's like, actually, this comes from a place of care. And I've really seen that with Rebecca. It's like probably more caring than I could be about other people. It really does come from this different place. But I assume this isn't the case for every skeptic or street epistemologist.
It's really tricky. You're hitting on an ethical dilemma that people who learn this approach contemplate frequently, and we discuss it a lot. Because you're right, there are some beliefs that are valuable to people, even though they may not necessarily be true. Uh, there's a couple of different ways you can go about it. One thing that you can do is simply ask them, if you discover that you don't have good reasons for this, how do you think that you would cope without the belief?
Mhm.
Or the more classic, do you want to believe true things? And if somebody says that they do, despite the cost, then I think it's fair game. However, it's really important to be constantly observing how they're responding to the progress that you're making, because losing a cherished belief can be really problematic to people.
Yeah.
And if they don't have an alternate belief to put in there, or some other tradition or activity to meet the needs that the current belief is providing,
Yeah.
then I think it could be really challenging for people to struggle with it. That there have been a couple times where I've ended conversations with folks because they seemed unusually dependent on holding the view.
Yeah.
And I figured, I could ask 3 questions and they probably won't be as confident that this is true anymore. However, there's just something about the way that they're behaving that makes me think that they need it. But that's my barometer. I generally try to ask them, do you want to believe true things despite the cost? And if they say yes, then I usually proceed, but cautiously.
Right. That sounds like a really, really great question that kind of gets to the nubbin of it, because I love the
Mm-hmm.
nubbin. But it's this idea that there is
Is
like
that
maybe
an English term, or?
I guess so, a cat term, but like a hierarchy of importance. And if you do put truth on the top, then you're going to get your like something else like meaning, which is a really something that I think I'm quite dependent on. Let's say that if you're getting your meaning from truth alone and believing in true things alone, then like you said, it's fair game. But if you think that you're taking away some of the things that people like the image that Rebecca has of the Jenga tower, have you seen this? If you're taking away some of those foundational blocks just aggressively so that everything falls down, and like you said, not putting anything equally or more constructive in place, yeah, it's a delicate area.
Yeah, this reminds me of a talk that I had with a guy. It's a 4-part talk. His name is Shane, and I cannot wait to release the series of videos. But during the second or the third talk, he's a Christian, I think, and he thinks God is real. And we start talking about alternate frameworks of morality and how a person could actually find meaning and purpose without thinking that God is real.
Right.
So it wasn't me telling him how you do it, because I don't believe in any God. I was asking him how does he think that he would do it if he discovered that this isn't true.
Nice.
And it was interesting because he surfaced some like a 10 list thing that was developed by the Boy Scouts. So he said there's really like the concepts of that would probably be like the base, that would sort of serve as the base work for my morality, I suppose, if I didn't think that this was true, that this God was real. So you can even just ask people how they think other people manage to do it without the belief, and then in the process of them explaining how they think other people do it, they may very well be sketching out how they could possibly do it without the belief.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like having I don't know, like stabilizer wheels on a little bicycle.
We talked about, as we were talking, we discussed it as like a safety net to catch you.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you think people who discover that they don't have good reason for thinking that this God is real manage to rebuild? And what's their safety net? And when you start framing it in those terms, I think that discussion may have made subsequent discussions from that point on possibly more effective, now that he's aware that there might be something else for him.
Yeah.
Do you follow?
No, completely, because it takes away it's not just loss. You're not just left with losing something.
Yeah, it's replacement. And yes, maybe there's rebuilding will take time and cost, and I might jeopardize relationships with family and friends. However, if you value truth above all else, if you're willing to pay the cost, and there are people who are, they seem to be willing to proceed in the exploration of their views with this approach.
Indeed. Okay, Anthony. Well, I'm feeling quite brave, so I'm willing to put one of my closely held, fairly recent woo-woo beliefs on the line.
Okay. Well, you're very brave, and we can go at whatever speed you're comfortable with here. Sure. I can even sort of explain why I'm asking you the questions before I ask them, or something along those lines.
Let's do that. Yeah. We can kind of talk about the questions themselves.
Yeah, because I think it's helpful for the people who are listening to understand why I'm even asking you these questions.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
So
What's your claim?
I believe in astrology.
Okay.
You've probably done this before.
I think I've had a few talks about astrology, but, and this is a very important part of street epistemology, I try not to assume what you mean by that word, because
Yeah.
my understanding and all the people who are listening to this, and even your view of it, could be completely different. So let's get your definition of what you mean by astrology when you say that
Okay.
you think that it's real.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I believe that the planets act like a mirror to what is happening on Earth.
Hmm.
I don't believe in causation. I believe in correlation. I believe that there, on the like spectrum of things, like can we do things on Earth that might, how much free will do we have within this planetary situation? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that for the most part, it's mostly predetermined. So my kind
Hmm.
of views are it's correlation, not causation, and things are pretty much predetermined, and that's the universe that we live in. The
Okay.
planets are just another way of seeing that.
Okay. And did you notice people there that I was really quiet and let you explain what it is you think? And I said, okay, yes. Mm-hmm. So I'm not just shutting you down.
No, it felt supportive. You held the space.
Okay, good. And I don't want you to feel like I'm judging you on your view either, even though I may not think that it's true. I can even tell you where I stand on your claim if you want.
Actually,
That's
that
the
would
other
be
thing.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, would that be helpful?
Yeah.
As you've described it, I'm of the position that there's no relationship at all between what humans are doing and the position of the planets.
Sure.
That's my view on it. But I'm interested in figuring out your reasons why you think that that's the case and how you confirm that those are good reasons. So if you're comfortable proceeding, I suppose we can move on.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
okay.
this would be the closest thing to, I guess, evidence that we're looking for. What astrologers tend to do is we might look at the position of the planets on the day, the exact moment you were born. And depending on where they are, says something about, particularly in ancient astrology, everything from your personality to like your resources, finances, family, different people in your life, relationships, and it kind of holds within it a story that will ultimately play out throughout your life and even beyond that. Like for example, Van Gogh, he wasn't famous in his lifetime, obviously, but afterwards became massively famous. And there is a timing technique that can show when he was likely to become famous posthumously.
Okay.
Yeah, so it could also, for that reason, astrology can also be used to predict things that are going to happen in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this would be the point where I might ask how sure you are that this is really true. Because I think to this point, we've been largely talking about the what of your belief. This is what I believe. And maybe you gave a quick little reason there, like with Van Gogh. How sure are you that this is really true on a scale from 0 to 100? Can we quantify it? You don't have to if you don't want to, by the way.
Yeah. I would say I'm deliberately trying to, I always reserve like a percentage of my beliefs about anything for, could be wrong. And this is one of those things, but it's still pretty high, and it's kind of getting higher. This year, let's say, it went from like maybe like 70 to like 90 at least.
Now that's interesting. Okay. Now, what I would like to do here, just for people listening and yourself, is test to see what moved you up.
Yeah.
Or at least at the very least, understand what it was that moved you up. So you said something really interesting there, that you've actually increased your confidence over this last year in this position. What was that reason? Do you have a specific example or something that we can explore? And here's the other thing too. Before you even explain what that is, if you discovered that you don't have a good way for verifying that reason, would it bring you back down to a 70? Would it bring you back down to a 50? Would it keep you at a 90? Would you not budge at all if we explored this reason?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, really good question. Right. So I would say at this point, no. I mean, even that's possible, right? Like, of course, there could be something that would make everything that I've seen, like, let's say if somebody says, Kat, you've had a brain tumor. I'm sorry, but you know, it could be that extreme, and or just you've been in a dream and you've just woken up or something like that. Whereas if somebody just said, the evidence you have, which I can just share, I guess, which is like looking at different birth charts and hearing more and more stories, actually learning about astrology itself, and the reasoning behind it. So all of this information and yeah, like specific things about my own life and my own chart, weird timings of things.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not being super specific, but like it could be anything from, oh, I see that Venus and Mars are meeting today. Oh, I'm gonna, funnily enough, at that exact time, my ex got in contact with me, and that won't mean a lot if Venus and Mars don't mean a lot to you, but it's that kind of thing.
I see. You've
So
had some
anyway,
experiences
yeah,
over the year that lead you to conclude with a higher degree of confidence that it's real. So the question, I think, was something like, if you hadn't had those personal experiences, would you still be at a 70?
right. I'm sure I would be.
Okay. You're at a 90 now. Okay. If you discovered that you don't have a good way for verifying those reasons, would it affect your confidence?
See, yeah, that's the hard thing, because I'm like, I can't imagine what it would be other than you've been lied to, or like,
Well, it could be something as simple as, I don't know if I have a really good way of testing to see if the thing that happened to me has anything to do with the alignment of the planets, for
right. It's
example.
like, what proves that it's not coincidence?
How do you rule out coincidence?
Yeah.
Maybe might be a way that I would phrase it. Yeah, if you discovered that you don't have a good way of telling the difference between what you think is happening and coincidence,
Yeah.
would it have any effect in your overall confidence in this proposition?
I would say that it's the same level of like, could it be coincidence, even if you're running like a scientific experiment? Because isn't that what you're doing? You're kind of like, you're testing these things to see what results you get, and you repeat them, and hopefully you get the same answer enough times and you can call it true. Yeah, double check what I'm talking about there. I'm just thinking about like the basic experiments I used to run when I was like 15 in school. I don't know too much about what scientists really do, but what I'm trying to say is there any way of like absolutely ruling out coincidence even within science?
Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Coincidence could always be a factor, even in things that we have a good reason to think are true.
Exactly. And that's the view I have with astrology. Like, to me,
Hmm.
it's like, of course, coincidence could be a factor, but there is so much evidence over thousands of years. Um, and of course, yes, astrologers get things wrong too. Um, and the nature of astrology is that I do see how it's not scientific. I don't call astrology a science. Um,
Okay.
and this is where like we start bringing in other worldviews, because this is not astrology working within the regular worldview. It doesn't fit in science for me.
Hmm.
And so this is when like some like trying to say, would this, you know, stand up in a lab? Can we test astrology? My answer is
Mm-hmm.
no. And that's because I've kind of created this other thing, which is, oh, the universe is not what it seems. There is like something spiritual going on here, and
Mm.
it's not just that matter that we're dealing with. It's not just planets as matter and humans as matter. There's like something else, and that's the thing I can't understand. And
Hmm.
it's like, God, kind of hard to disprove,
Mm-hmm.
but also hard to prove. I mean, you can't prove it.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
It's a
So
conundrum, Anthony.
no, that's good. But I'm thinking now there might be a deeper level to explore here besides the astrology, based on what you've just said there, because
Yeah.
it almost seems like what you're saying, and please correct me if this isn't what you're saying, and this is another thing that I'll do in street epistemology, is we're aiming for clarity,
Mm.
but it sounds like what you're saying is that there's really no way to test this because the universe isn't as straightforward as we all think that that many of us might actually assume that is the case or think that is the case.
Right.
So basically, this is what it sounds like you're saying, but correct me. It almost sounds like you're saying I'm entitled to pretty much believe whatever we want because the universe is so queer and indescribable, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm hearing you say, but
Completely.
Mm.
Completely. And astrology has completely opened my eyes to that.
Mm.
That's what did that. That's what broke my brain, basically. Just and I don't think it's unreasonable. I think a lot of hardcore scientists would say, yeah, we don't understand everything. And my argument is like, maybe we can't, at least not with this, not even with the scientific method. I think there is something that's operating outside of these rules and laws.
I do have maybe one more question about astrology for you. And it kind of relates to testing, I suppose, but what would go through your mind if you and a friend both thought that a specific event that you both agreed happened was resulting in contradictory things? So for example, your friend saw this event as a reason why she should go to Japan or something.
Yeah.
And then you saw the event as a reason why you shouldn't go to Japan. Is it possible that people can be getting contradictory messages from the events?
Oh, like from astrological events?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could, for sure, especially with the vast range of differing views within the field of astrology itself.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the weird things that happen are like two things. You can either get two people saying slightly different things about the same event, and using the same method to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say traditional Western astrology, and then you might get two people who are using different methods based on the same astrological stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and coming to the same conclusion.
Mm.
So like, this is why
Mm-hmm.
it's, it must drive scientists mad, because like that doesn't even make any sense.
Mm.
So that's kind of why I get to the point of there's something else going on here.
Mm-hmm.
This is more to do with divination. We're conduits for this like godly message or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is that people have gone about it to test it to some degree.
And they failed for the most part. I think the closest.
Oh, to test it to be not true. Is that what you mean? When
just,
you say failed, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just mean testing astrology in general. I think I don't think there have been like any successful.
Oh, I thought you were proposing that people actually did try to go about testing it, where they would look at.
They did try.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I think this is kind of also why I had to conclude that astrology operated outside of these bounds.
Yeah, I think if we were to keep talking, I would like to explore why you even think that there's something other than the natural world that might be influencing all these things. 'Cause I think that there might be a larger issue, like a larger issue or level that we probably have to talk about.
Yeah, no, for sure. Maybe we don't need to go there, but like, one thing I know about that is I'm not sure what that is myself. It's like, I don't know. I just imagine it as like, you could have a physicist who they have like nearly all of the stuff figured out, but they have to sometimes create things, don't they, that are like, well, we just need to put this like figure in there to make this whole thing work. Physicists do this, don't they? And I think that's what I've done with my like worldview. It's like, in order for all of these things, and not just astrology, like other things that I have, I guess, experienced like inwardly, in order for me to explain them, I do have to create this thing, which, let's call it God. So
yeah, and that would probably be the area that I'd want to go. We can keep exploring the horoscope thing if you want.
Yeah,
it's up to you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Okay. It almost sounds like what you're saying is there's no way to there's no way to test it because coincidence will always be a factor.
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you're saying?
Is that the only thing? No, that I'm just trying to think, because that's definitely one of the factors that it would mean you can't disprove it. You can't prove it. The other one would be, there are so many weird variables. Like, without the problem with talking about astrology to somebody who isn't like wanting to get into the whole thing, is that there's a lot to it. And let's say just the fact that you've got these two different quite very different divisions of astrology going alongside each other, and the fact that they both work, that doesn't make any sense scientifically. And yet
what does it mean for it to work, though? Like what's happening when you say it works?
Making accurate predictions about the future, as well as people's lives, people's personalities. Yeah.
Okay. There's a prediction about the future. So there's these multiple ways of looking at the alignment of the planets, and then it's your position that the predictions are identical.
It can be, yeah,
and
using these two different methods. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, and like Rebecca's told me all of this stuff, so I know about like Barnum's statements, where I could say something about you which describes you accurately, but also describes like about
they're so general
of the population.
Yeah,
and there certainly are. And I've done things for people, I've done readings for people where they've been like, yeah, that's totally true, and then like, shit, isn't that true for everyone? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't have actually said that to everyone, trust me, there is like a reason for it. But to a lot of people, and because I'm learning, I'm a beginner, a lot of what I'm saying is, it's not, it's broad. It's like, my teacher describes it as like, you throw an arrow at a dartboard, you're just trying to get the arrow on the board, you're not going for the bullseye. And sometimes some percent of the time people will get that bullseye, but that's not it. That's not what we're doing.
Do you think that there's a way that you yourself could develop some sort of test to see if it's really working the way that you think that it is?
I was doing this. I was trying to test it myself, and I got to the point, it was interesting how I thought I was onto something. I was like, I'm seeing a pattern here that describes, I think I was looking into creativity, and I was like, oh, there's something here, something happening in this house and with this planet. Ultimately, when I got to a certain point of like a number of people submitting their birth chart data, the pattern went away and everything just kind of leveled out. So I was like, no, can't test it. And this is also the thing of, that's when I was just like, well, it's not testable. It doesn't want to be tested. It's a thing that we need to kind of respect. There's like a something else behind this that is saying, it's almost got a sense of humor. People say this about tarot as well. You'll pick a card and it's not like I was going to say a weather forecast, but these omens are strange, and it feels like there's another kind of intelligence behind it. Sounds really crazy.
No, that's okay. It's just really interesting. Yeah, I think I would probably spend more time exploring how we might be able to figure out if your explanation that you're coming up with is really the explanation.
Right. So you think that I
think that you're observing these things and well, I think you're experiencing these things. It's the explanation that you're coming up with that I think is worth exploring.
Yeah.
For example, I'm wondering if I were to talk to somebody else who was telling me the exact same things, and then their hypothesis of what's happening, and they said that this is I don't want it to be demeaning here, but I just because there's a fairy that's making all this happen.
Yeah.
Would that person be on equal footing as what you're proposing with regards to their explanation of what's causing it?
I think yes. And this is because, beliefs are so personal, and of course I could be wrong. So I am totally open to that idea of then I'm open to the idea of somehow, they pull back, I don't know who they are, but they pull back the curtain, and the Wizard of Oz, like there's the little guy pretending to be the Wizard of Oz, and I'd be like, and that would be disappointing, for sure. But I guess I'm holding it loosely enough to be like, well, you say that about your version of reality, I say that about mine. So and basically what I'm trying to say is, I know already that there are so many people who explain astrology very differently to me. Some people do think it's causation, for example. Planets are literally causing things through like electromagnetic things.
Yeah, so I think the takeaway perhaps is that people are coming up with all different explanations of what might explain what's going on, but they all seem equally unable to be tested.
Yeah.
Is that right?
They are, and I'm sort of on the side of, why is testing something using a particular method any better than because I think this does come down to it for me, because like the question of, do you value truth more than anything else? I'm not sure I do. And so it's like the same with this scientific method, or whatever you want to call it. I guess I'm not holding that so highly either. So then it comes down to, well, what do I want to believe? What's making my world, particularly right now? I can share that, this is one of my favorite things in the world, because of all of these other things it's given me, like a lot of religious people say, community, things like that. And so if I was going to choose, I'm going to choose this, even though it does honestly feel like sometimes playing make-believe. When I was at this conference earlier this year, I was like, okay, we're all here, we're all playing, isn't this fun? And I was in another spiritual community later in the year, and I felt exactly the same.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask it a slightly different way. Let's pretend, do you have any family or sisters, kids?
All of them.
Okay, do you have children?
No.
Okay. I've got two. Let's pretend that you're looking to expand your family and bring a child, into your family. Would you want them to have this outlook? Would you want them to have the same valuation of truth as you seem to have?
I think the level of openness I have, I think, is a good thing.
I agree.
So yeah, I would want to encourage them of that. Would I start indoctrinating them into astrology? I would try not to.
Interesting.
And because I grew up in a Catholic upbringing, and I think my parents were really good at, they did the whole thing of, you're going to go to Catholic school and you're going to go jump through all those hoops. But at the same time, they were certainly not going to, they didn't really, well, maybe other people have experienced this too. They didn't really care what I believed, but that also gave me the freedom I needed to explore my beliefs. That's the way I perceived it anyway. Anyway, that's what I'd want to give them, that freedom.
You would like to give them the freedom to choose whatever views they want.
Yeah, and you've just made me realize that I would actually be really upset if they got fundamentalist about anything. So if they were like, Kat, astrology's real, Mum, astrology's real, and like, and I'm 100% convinced of it, that would actually concern me the most.
And I won't change. I'm not even willing to consider changing my mind here.
Right. That.
Yeah. Oh, so I see. Being dogmatic on anything, including astrology, could be upsetting.
Yes.
So let's set aside the dogmatism, and they said, it doesn't matter to me if I'm believing something that's true or not. How would you respond to your fictional daughter?
Well, I think that's my stance. I think that's probably my stance, right?
I know that's your stance. What do you think about them adopting that stance?
Oh, then of course I wouldn't mind, because that's clearly what I think is the best way to be.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know. I wouldn't mind them thinking that, because I don't mind myself thinking it.
Okay. That's really fascinating to me, because what I've found that a lot of people will say, I'm okay if I'm believing something that's not true and I'm getting value from it. But when it comes to my kids, there's something different about that
Ah,
situation.
that's
I want
interesting.
I want them to question more. I want them to, but it's not that that's not the sense that I'm getting from you, that you'd be okay with your child admitting that she is fine believing things that are not true, as
Yeah,
long
but
as,
hang on. What you said there about the questioning, I would want them to be questioning things.
yes, it's the dogmatism that would be upsetting to you, not necessarily that they're okay with believing things that are not true. This
Yeah.
this is what I think maybe your mantra is. Correct me if it's not. It's okay to believe things that are not true as long as you're open to belief revision.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Ah, thank you for coming up with my mantra for me.
Yeah, there
but
you go.
but I think, and this is why I think me and Rebecca often get to like butting heads on things, because we're never going to agree about the truth question. She genuinely wants to find out what's true, and I'm not that fast.
You don't even mind if you're believing something that's not true.
like
Is that?
like a child in a way. Yeah, like a
Mhm.
child who's, you could probably tell a kid your imaginary friend isn't real, because it's a different kind of real to them. I think this is what I'm kind of getting at. These things are real to me, but they're probably not real to, they might not be real objectively, in what we're calling objective reality.
Mhm. Okay.
um
So I want to make a distinction between opinion and fact here.
mm,
Are your views opinions, or are they more opinions, or are they more fact claims about the nature of reality? What do you think?
more opinions. And I love how you put that. It's almost like there being a scale, because that's how I feel it is. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like a scale to me. And I could accept that my entire worldview is based on opinion. One thing I just kind of wanted to bring up there: can we choose our beliefs?
That's a
Because
good.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's maybe too big to get into, but like, I've been thinking, I'm choosing to believe this, but am I? Could
I don't.
I?
That's a good question. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Uh,
I do think. I don't think that we are choosing our beliefs. I think that we are formulating them, and then after the fact, when we're asked to explain why we believe it,
mm,
our brain is coming up with reasons that we think are adequate to justify it.
yeah.
I think that's what's happening. But regardless of whether or not we are choosing our beliefs or we're not, I think the act of exploring our position through this Socratic approach of
Yeah.
street epistemology is beneficial, because it could help a person discover the reason that I scrambled to come up with on the spot, because I had never really thought about it before. Maybe that's not a good reason. Maybe I need a different reason. So
Yeah.
there's still value, I think, in exploring our justifications for these views,
Yeah, I think that's
even
you.
though we have maybe even no control over what it is we are believing.
I think that's kind of the line that I want to carry on with myself, and like learn more about street epistemology, because I would like to know, what on earth drew me to astrology in the first place? Was I seeking this added meaning in my life? And what's keeping me there? Is it like
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
friends and just like the visuals? Like, it's just, there are so many things that clearly appeal to my like innate personality. It and everything else
Yeah.
is just stuff that my rational mind has kind of laid on top.
That's a great way of visualizing it. Let me ask you this. It's a hypothetical, and some people aren't crazy about those, but I think this is a fairly realistic one to entertain. Let's pretend that a year from now, people in your community just start not liking you.
Mm,
They start coordinating events, but they don't invite you to it, or when you show up, they give you like a nasty look, and you're clearly getting feedback that you're not wanted there.
mm.
You're ostracized from this community. And I'm sure they're great people and they would probably never do this, but just for the purpose of it, if you found that if you were unaccepted in the community, would it in any way impact your confidence in the truth of your view?
So here's what I think would happen, because I've thought about this myself, and it's been something like, the first thing I would have to do, because I would start feeling differently about astrology. Astrology itself would not be my friend anymore, because other people like in the astrology community wouldn't be. at the back of my mind, I think for a long time. So what I would probably start to do is like maybe take it out of my life more. I would stop studying it. I would stop
Hmm.
producing content about it. I would stop checking the daily planets. So as I would
Interesting.
reduce all of those things in my life, like all of the ritual nature of it, and the educational element of it, then I imagine it. Then two things could happen. Either in the back of my mind, probably for a long time, I would still think, but maybe it's real, and I'd probably still be thinking, this thing happened. I bet Mars was over here or something. But after a while, that would probably just dissipate. That's probably what
Strictly
happened.
because you were ostracized from the community.
Yeah, I imagine I would say that I'm pretty emotionally bonded with astrology at this point, and that's everything that it touches in my life. So yeah, I would then have to, like, it would be like a breakup. I would have to break up with astrology, and you still think about that person for a while. So I think that's what would happen.
Let me repeat back what I think I'm hearing. If you suddenly found yourself being ostracized from the community that's warm and welcoming at the moment with regards to astrology, it would result in you taking another look at your position, and the behaviors that are associated with it would decrease.
Yeah, I wouldn't say my position. I would say primarily the behaviors.
The behaviors would change.
And yeah.
You'd be less willing to act out on it or look stuff up if
Yeah.
you didn't have the community behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So
Your
everything.
acceptance in the community behind it, I mean.
Yeah. So all the things that that I do that are astrological would go. I would be left with that belief potentially, but like I said, I think that would go if I removed all of the other things.
I see. You still might maintain the view that something's going on. There's some relationship between what's happening to people and the position of the planets, but you wouldn't be so active you wouldn't be acting it out as much. It wouldn't be affecting your life all that much.
Yeah. I
as
don't
it
think
is today.
Yeah, and I don't think I would be like, well, now I can really dig into the literature that disproves it. I wouldn't then go out to attack my own beliefs about it so much. Because I think that could, is that even what somebody might do in this situation? Like, is this comparable to, let's say, if somebody gets thrown out? Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking about it. Well, it tends to happen when let's say somebody's a diehard Jehovah's Witness, and then they realize they don't have good reasons for it, or they start expressing some wonder and question and curiosity and perhaps even doubt. They could get ostracized from their community. What tends to happen there? Well, I guess it would depend on the person. Some people might redouble their efforts to believe it, I suppose, or it could cause them to start questioning even more. It could definitely affect their behavior. They may stop going to church or donating to an organization, I suppose, if they started questioning it some more.
I wonder if it would help people though, like, as in, if I had this kind of difficult time with astrology, the astrological community specifically, would it be actually comforting for me to then sit down with my skeptic friend or start watching all of these YouTube videos disproving astrology? Would that kind of give me some kind of comfort in the same way that you might tell stories about your ex, trying to remember the bad times because you want to justify what happened a bit more? So that's possible.
That's very possible. And another thing I could see happening is, and this happens with people who leave religion, is that we will tend to lash out at the people who are still in it. So it's conceivable that, if you got booted from your community and you started doing it less and less, you started acting out on it less and less. Another option, I suppose, for people would be, you might start attacking, might be too strong of a word, but it's possible you might start pushing back on the people who are still in it.
Yeah.
And we do that. That happens so much in the atheist community. We tend to attack the people who hold these views still, and we don't believe it anymore. It could be its own sort of. It could have its own gravitational pull, basically, when you find yourself on the outside of a view that you've held for the longest time.
True.
But I do think it's interesting that it seems like you would be more skeptical, and you would curtail your behaviors more if you find yourself being ostracized from the community. Right. It seems like the community aspect of it carries more weight for you than the actual truth of the belief?
It's a huge part of it, but it isn't everything. And like I said, for that time, the thing that would change would be my active, the things I do in my life that I call astrology.
Mm-hmm.
The belief wouldn't necessarily go,
Abate.
at least not straight away. But you're right. What I would say is that, you know, how much of your love for astrology is the people? And it's like probably 60%, probably more than half.
It's a big part of it. So if let's say you found another community, let's say that they were skeptical people who were interested in exploring beliefs that people have that may not be testable. If you found another community to go to, would it make you more open to, it sounds like you would curtail your behaviors, but you might still, that's what I guess I'm wondering. If you completely replace the community that you're in, would you be more apt to lower your confidence that horoscopes are actually a thing?
Yeah, I think only if that new community had something to replace that with. Let's say it was the skeptic community. I can imagine that being great and really fulfilling because they have conferences and there's a way of seeing the world that maybe I wouldn't need astrology in that case because I'd be so convinced on the scientific methods. Yeah, so I think that replacement thing would work wonderfully.
Yeah. What is it about horoscopes that fulfills you? What hole is it filling, if any?
Oh, so many holes.
What's the biggest one?
Basically. So I was really interested in personality typology to begin with. So that was one thing that kind of expanded. Like if you're into Myers-Briggs and the Big Five and all these different personality type tests, modern astrology, which looks a lot at your psychology, is really appealing. So that's where I started. And then as I got into traditional astrology, so this is the stuff that was around in like Greece 2000 years ago, that's when it started to appeal to my like this is kind of scientific because the way that they devised the way things work are based on geometry and numbers and patterns. So whatever part of my personality that gets drawn to, I guess, just things really neatly fitting together like some beautiful cosmic puzzle. So there's definitely like an artistic appreciation or like a sense of wonder. And there's also the thing of like, you know, not having God before that, or at least being like, I guess there's something.
Okay.
That actually having something that's like, if there's something, this is what it's enabling us to do, because it's this communication with potentially the divine, and that's like obviously hitting the meaning spot and all of that stuff.
I was wondering, does this view bring order to chaos for you?
Completely. Is it just that? Yeah, because I'm thinking that's quite abstract, order to chaos. But let's say that chaos is the life. It's cancer in kids. It's terrible things that happen. And then order is, well, shit. We know that the planets move around and no one's arguing about that. And if they are a mirror, then we simply are left with one. We've got two choices. We can either curse the planets, which I don't do, but we could also accept the planets as we accept things here on Earth. And so I kind of tie, and many people do tie astrology with Stoicism. Some people think that's a bit nihilistic, but I think it's a pretty, it's given me this acceptance, which people find in all sorts of ways. So it's given me that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's probably a good walkthrough of your view.
It's really been helpful for me to just kind of understand my own stance. Yeah. Like, because I am, you know, like I said, there is that 10%, and I don't know how, it's still fragile. All of my beliefs are pretty fragile. And like you said, open to revision. But it's always a reminder of like, oh yeah, this is why astrology only seems to be beneficial in my life right now. And actually that was just maybe a question to wrap up on, is when you meet people who their beliefs, even if you don't agree with them or don't think they're true in the slightest, if they're only giving somebody good things, isn't that like, can't you just be like, okay, go on your merry way, you're fine?
Well, yeah, I used to kind of think that way. I tend to think that maybe it's not really taking into account the whole picture, because we talked about this a little bit. You might actually stop acting out on your views if you were ostracized from your community. People act out on or behave differently because of the views they hold. So a person thinking that, yeah, I have a view that this is true and it's probably not true, but it's not harming me or any other people. Well, how could you be so sure that that's the case?
Right.
Are you depriving yourself of the reality of the situation if you are not willing to entertain other propositions? And fortunately, it seems like you are open to, you're not dogmatic on these views, and that's a relief. I do meet a lot of people who they will not budge. They are certain that they're right. And that's not the sense that I'm getting here. And it's refreshing to meet a person who's not so locked into their views, that you're open to it.
But you made a really good
Yeah.
point. I'm just thinking now, like, let's say astrology dictated that tomorrow I take up this new kind of habit, like maybe it's like related to health. I mean, I don't want to do the whole like, oh, I'm going to cut out a certain food group, because yeah, like religions actually do that, and I'm not saying it's better or worse, but that's when I think it would start changing my life. I think right now the worst thing is probably how much I annoy friends and family with astrological correlations, that I'm because this is what new astrologers do. We're just like, everything's astrology. So yeah, that's probably annoying. But that will pass.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of people miss, is that we are still behaving and interacting with reality and affecting other people because of the views that we have, even though this may be a harmless, in your mind, a harmless view that gives me benefit, and it's bringing me community, and I have a blast when I hang out with these folks. Like I'm cracking up and laughing, and I feel so great afterwards. Those feelings are real. That's what's really happening. However, you very well could be missing out on other aspects that are justifiable. And there's still ways to achieve those things, like we talked about finding alternate groups. So this actually reminds me of a talk that I had with a young woman who leaves out water for the spirits of her deceased relatives, because it's her view, because her grandmother told her this, that when loved ones die, they don't go away right away. They get thirsty. So you leave out the water. And we started talking, and I think she came to realize that she didn't have really good reasons, or she was being somewhat biased in her evidence for concluding that this is true. And if I do end up meeting with her for a third time, I would like to explore how she thinks she can still show respect for the loved ones who are in our lives, or who were in our lives but no longer are, besides wrapping it up in something that's not testable and not demonstrable in any meaningful way.
Yeah,
and that's an adjustment. That can be an adjustment for a lot of people. How can I still show reverence for my loved ones without having to leave out water for them, because I think that there's a spirit hanging around?
Yeah, it's like the territory of superstition, because I would say that I'm quite superstitious about a lot of things that I say that I don't believe. Like ghosts, I say that I don't believe them, but I act in a superstitious way at times. I'll go to a new house and it's like in the country, and I get scared, and I'm like, what am I scared of? It's not a killer, it's a ghost.
Yeah.
Even though I don't believe in them. So
how would your life be better or worse, or no change at all, if you set aside the superstitious views and this view on astrology? How would your life change in any way?
Yeah, so astrology in particular, probably only astrology,
We can focus on that.
I would think it would be like like out of a scale of 0 to 100, it would knock my life down maybe 30 points.
Well, I'm sorry, I have the maid's vacuuming in the background.
Right.
Do you hear that?
I can't.
Oh, okay. You can?
No, I can't.
Okay, you can't.
But yeah,
so
it would knock down my happiness right now. If I'm at 100, it would knock it down by about 30 points. It would like take a pretty fucking big hit, because I really
you would lose happiness if you discarded the view On astrology alone?
In the same way, if you said, I'm single, but like if you broke up with somebody, I'm pretty sure it would affect me in the same kind of way. Yeah.
You'd feel like you were losing something.
Yes. But I would get over it. Like I wouldn't. Yeah.
If it's not true, would you really be losing anything?
Good point. That's such an important thing to keep in mind, isn't it?
I mean, I know you'd probably lose some community, but we talked about
sure.
alternates.
But you're right. Like in terms of just like, real loss, I guess not. And I think that would be a really helpful thing for those around me to like keep in mind, to make sure they ask me that when if that happens.
What are you losing here if you decide that I can't believe this anymore? What would be the impact to my life?
I think that's like a comforting thing. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, ultimately nothing, because like you said, if it's not real, then none of those ideas that I had. But because even meaning stuff like that, I'm sure I could find other ways to like have that. But this is the thing, would I just like find something else, that isn't, I mean, I guess everyone's like, cat science, go for that one, but like maybe I wouldn't pick science. I would probably pick something else that's equally wacky.
Sure. I follow you. I hear what you're saying. You could find yourself replacing this with something else that may be just equally as justifiable.
Yes. And
possibly, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Who can say? But I wouldn't rule that out, because I think we're meaning seeking and meaning making creatures. We want to explain our world, and this is kind of when I come down on like, why is science any better than any of our other bonkers beliefs? It's different, true, and everything else is under this category of like, it's like everything in science. That's how it feels to me, but I'm still like, yeah, but it's all us like pathetic little humans and equally amazing humans trying to explain things that ultimately no one thing can explain. Like no one's ever going to come down. So this is a belief I have. I don't think anyone's going to come down and say to us, you guys were right, you guys were wrong. No.
How are you generally with uncertainty?
I guess it's the ultimate cause of anxiety. So, and I'm like
for
fairly
you.
anxious. Yeah. Uncertainty.
For you or for people in general? Is it strictly for you? Or?
Oh, I guess for me, but I just assumed everyone. So maybe, are you trying to say that astrology is a way for me dealing with uncertainty?
I don't know. I mean, you were talking about order there before, and then I think I'm generally wondering how you feel about saying I don't know. I'm going to not take a position on that because I'm not sure which way to go on this. When it comes to uncertainty, it sounds like anxiety could be the byproduct of uncertainty for you.
It could. Couple of different things. That thing about not knowing, I can easily say I don't know, because I don't know if astrology is real. I believe it's real. I feel like that's kind of different.
And I understand the differences there too. Yeah, that's good.
But that thing about uncertainty about the future, and if we were just to explore what's in it for me with astrology, one of those things is, I guess it's kind of nice. I mean, I'm not even at the point where I can really do solid prediction work, but I believe I will be able to, and that's kind of cool. I mean, I'm not even that fussed about that part of it, but it's like, I'm sure there must be part of me, the anxious part, that does want to know what's going to happen. That's the curious. That's the curious part that gets something from astrology as well.
Okay, it sounds like you're saying that reducing my anxiety, or mitigating uncertainty reduces my anxiety to the point where I might accept something that I can't be sure is true.
Just because it gives me some more certainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you? Yes. Are you deceiving yourself in thinking that you have certainty when you don't, in order to mitigate your anxiety about uncertainty?
That could be true. Yeah. Yeah. And I would describe myself as fairly naive. I remember being a kid and like, so this is a conversation I had with Rebecca. So when you're a kid and you're scared, there was a story where I was scared that there were skeletons under the floorboards. And I called my sister in. And originally I was like, maybe we should check just to make sure that there aren't any skeletons under the floorboards. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, yeah, but can't, like, logically, like, a skull wouldn't fit under the floorboards. There's not enough space. And I remember thinking, like, she can't prove that, but it doesn't matter because she's the authority. Good night, I can go to bed. And Rebecca's perspective was like, maybe not like literally, but she would be the kid who would want to pull up the floorboards to make sure herself. And I think that basically that's what it all comes down to. I'm happy for a big sister to tell me, you're probably fine. So maybe can I even be street epistemologized?
I think we've been doing it, honestly.
Okay, no, this has been fantastic.
Although it's been, been a little bit different approach, I suppose. We were talking about uncertainty. Oh, this is what I'm wondering. If you are believing something that's not true and you're getting value from it, wouldn't the realization that you may be believing and acting out on something that's possibly not true be a cause of anxiety in and of itself? Why wouldn't that cause anxiety? I would think if I was aware that I was believing something and acting out on it, but I couldn't be certain that it was true, that in itself might cause me to wonder about it and maybe result in anxiety.
I can see that. I was searching inside to be like, am I feeling like that? I don't know. And that might even, that could be a couple of things. That could even point to me believing it more than I think I do. That could actually be what's happening. It's like, I'm telling you, yeah, there's a 10% chance that this isn't real. It's fine. I'm open to change on this. But if it's genuinely solving some anxiety and I'm feeling comfortable with that, yeah, either I believe it more than I say I do, or my anxiety just isn't that high. Don't know which one it is.
Yeah. And only you can answer that.
Well, and even can I I think it is genuinely a hard thing to figure out what we believe. And so much of it is like, who was it who said this? Pete Rollins, I think, talks a lot about our actions often deceive our beliefs, or like what we think we believe. And it's quite possible that that's what's happening here. And I need to, it would be good for me to ask more of these questions to myself and regularly ask them. So I'm, because I think, things change, opinions change.
Well, I think the fact that you're open, or you're self-reporting that you're open and not dogmatic about it, and that you are interested in occasionally taking a look at this to see how are all these things interacting? How is my view towards uncertainty possibly impacting my ability to accept things that may not necessarily be true? And also this idea of the community too, the influence of the community might be having. But no, I thought that was a really good discussion about your views. And that's, I asked a lot of questions. I tried to be neutral on it. I, wanted to be respectful and repeat back what I think I'm hearing, and yet ask you challenging enough questions where hopefully you felt somewhat comfortably uncomfortable when I was asking those.
Yeah, it is. It's great because it's hard. It's really hard because we so rarely question these things. And I definitely think you were respectful and a great listener. And this is, I guess, some of the skills that you need if you want to do this work, both on other people and yourself.
Oh, it seems critical. And it would be lovely if one day you learned this approach and then you decided to challenge me about something that I have using the same tools.
Right. Yeah. That would be fun. Science, right?
Or just the Socratic approach, of
that itself. Yeah.
Of asking me how I could be so sure that what I think is true is the case.
Sure.
Yeah. Do I have some biases? Right. What would be, is my community possibly keeping me from being a little bit more critical of my views? I'm not sure.
Yeah. These are things that we can always be turning in. So I just want to end with one last question, which is just general tips for anyone who is starting to question their beliefs? Because I feel like this is something you have to go in carefully.
General tips for people who are just starting to question their beliefs. I think my first advice would be to look at the video that Rebecca and I did recently that you actually narrated one of the responses, Eternal Dalmatian. That was awesome. She has a cameo in there. Check it out, folks. But Rebecca did a survey of people who have let go of their faith beliefs, and then she asked them what advice would they have for themselves at that point in time. So I think she's using the hashtag #HowWeLetGo on Twitter. So you can see the questions that people would ask themselves to encourage them to start questioning and be a little bit more open to exploration. So that would probably be a good place to start. But I suppose reassure yourself that there's a community of people who have asked these questions who don't believe it anymore. They're there for you. We can be resources and a support system for you. So it's not like you're leaving the tribe and you're alone. You are not alone.
Yeah.
There's a vibrant, loving community out there for people who are just waiting for you to ask yourself these questions. And try, if you're honest with yourself and you want to believe true things and you start asking yourself these questions, I think you'll probably find yourself in those communities that are there waiting for you.
That's so great. That's really comforting, and I think important for people to know and for me to know. So thank you so much, Anthony. This has been a lot of fun. I can't wait to get it out into the world.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Kat, for having me on. And I wish you all the best with your podcast.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you want to find out more about street epistemology, or SE as all the cool kids are calling it, you'll find links in the show notes or description. You can follow Anthony on social media at Magnabosco, and if you haven't already, go check out his YouTube channel where you'll see many more fascinating SE conversations. That's right, I'm one of the cool kids. If you want to keep up with The Seeker and the Skeptic, please subscribe on YouTube, on your podcast app, or hey, why not both? You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter. We're at Seeker Skeptic, and we'd love a few more reviews on the Apple Store if you happen to be in the neighborhood. Thanks for listening.